It seems the work of the Lord never stops for me in my testimony and my autobiography. I am finishing the manuscript for Digging Ditches, and I found another 50 pages that I had written. So here we go. I'm going to just read this to some that are reading my manuscript to help me edit it, to add to it, and then I'm going to get physical copies to people. Here it goes. Who is my mother? Who is my brother? But he who does the will of God. For several years, we went to Florida for family reunions. My brothers, sisters, and my mother would all rent condominiums on the beach in Boca Grande, Florida. Alcohol played a major part in these reunions. My brothers and I would drink all day and into the night. Neither my sisters nor their husbands were, I have to have better lighting for this. I'm going to give it a shot. We're big drinkers, but we made up for their lack of participation by carrying on the tradition my father had set for us. To party all day and into the night was expected. As you might guess, our wives were not too happy with us after days of this foolishness. Abusive behavior crept into these reunions, and our overindulgence with alcohol did not help. Traditionally, our family isolated any member who did not behave as the rest of them expected, often using sarcasm to manipulate that person into conforming. I longed to be accepted by my family despite the ridicule I'd endured in the past for my religious extremism. I was especially sensitive to remarks about my lack of attentiveness as a father. I spent part of my time alone playing tennis, but the comments about me would eventually get under my skin. I was experiencing the pressure of disapproval in a way I had not felt since I was berated by my father as a boy. Tennis had become a new reflection of my self-esteem. I obsessed with mastering the sport. This obsession was being compared with the time I spent playing with my children. My failure as a father was being emphasized by the amount of time I spent with my children versus the time my siblings spent with their children. A no-win situation. Eventually, I felt terribly guilty. I was easily manipulated by my own desire to be accepted by the group. This issue finally led to my isolation both from my natural family and from Jackie and her family. As 1986 passed and the winter of 1987 arrived, life pressed in on me from all sides. Jackie was not happy with my fatherhood. I was becoming dissatisfied with work, and my spiritual life seemed non-existent. Our family reunion that year would end in disaster. The abusive behavior would reach an all-time high, and I would make the decision that would change the course of my life. While in Boca Grande that February, Jack and I looked into the possibility of renting some retail space and opening a bookstore. One thing led to another, and before we knew it, we had written a check for a deposit on the store. We knew nothing of the business. We did not even know how we would accomplish such a move. All we knew was that I had to make this change. I was just barely existing, and with drinking too much, this looked like the opportunity that would help bring my life new meaning. It became the adventure of my life. Not bad, 4 minutes on that page. Let's turn the page. Bingo. This is not easy, kids, to write a book. To gain your life is to lose your life, according to the scriptures. I have been buried through baptism unto death. With a fresh vision and a whole new world to look forward to, our adventure began. I knew nothing about books or retail operations except for my part ownership in the paint store in Connecticut. When we got home, Jackie volunteered at the local bookstore, and I researched the information she brought home. Half the time we were planning, I would get cold feet and want to cancel the whole thing. But then I would think about the alternative and press on. I suppose that any major change in life causes doubts, but for me, this was a venture. This venture was the biggest gamble of my life. What if it was wrong? What if this was not the will of God? What would the consequence be? In August of 1987, we were ready to go. I bought a pull-along camper for the trip, and with the family in hand, we began our journey. I was able to leave some of the painting jobs and to be finished by my men, and our home in Ridgefield was rented until we could sell it. There were bills galore, with so much ahead and a lifestyle of credit behind. Somehow, I believed this boat would float, even though I did not know just how. I knew this had to work, and I'd have to ignore my fears. The Boy Scouts taught me to be prepared, but I did not always pay attention. Taking inventory usually revealed I was missing a sock or two. This journey, this new life adventure had to float or sink. There was no in between. I would not look back. I would deal with the problems as they came. This just had to work. We arrived in Florida on Joshua's 5th birthday. The trip had been fun. We camped at Jim and Tammy Baker's Heritage Village, USA, which was coming apart at that time too. Sadly, they had just been relieved of their duties there. Christianity, as I knew it, had fallen apart. I had moved on from that world, but the love for the Pentecostal experience lingered in my memory. My life in Florida would not see anything close to that memory for many years to come as I settled down to a world full of change. That fall, we registered the kids in a private Christian school, opened the store, and tried to settle into a 3-bedroom condominium. The kids were used to having a yard in which to play. They had so much energy, and I tried to keep them in the pool as much as possible. A rude awakening, though, was in store for me, or for us, when the senior citizens greeted us with less than open arms. I did not realize that the retired population did not want children around. Not being welcome was hard to take and did nothing to help the cultural adjustment we were experiencing. Jackie and I had spent our whole lives growing up in New England, and even though the weather was warm, it was different. Jackie had been close to her family and missed them, and to say the least. She also missed the mountains and the change of season. I heard these regrets repeated often as I tried to calm the storms that were just about to begin. Today has enough trouble of its own. Where my soul is full of troubles. I'm going to have to get those scriptures numbered. Opening the bookstore before the tourist season gave me enough time to work on any unseen glitches. As I learned the business, I began to understand the buying patterns of a small population inhabiting Boca Grande. Boca's affluent clientele rarely hesitated to buy the more expensive hardback editions. I immensely enjoyed the challenge of ordering the proper books even before someone would request a title. Usually, I got my hint from a literate customer who wanted to read a particular author. I would then order a few more copies, just in case another customer who was just had to read the latest release would come in asking for the same book. This process made me look like I was on top of the literary world. The truth was I had very little interest in reading. What irony. Here I was with no formal training and with no desire to read, selling books for a living. But I was in a venture that met every dream I'd ever had. I love to talk to people, now a daily occurrence. I love to do business on the phone, and that became the part of my routine. I liked everything about this business. In fact, I loved it. But a storm was gathering ahead, and I did not know how to deal with it. The income was not catching up to the accumulated debt, and continuing to borrow would eventually force me to come to grips with some ugly realities. I was borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. I was determined to make it in this business and never go back to painting. Such an inflexible attitude left me to sink or swim with no middle ground. The bookstore was making money, but like all businesses, that money had to be reinvested into the business. Our home in Connecticut sold, but the home we bought in Florida carried a higher mortgage, adding more pressure to the problem. My previous lifestyle had been fueled by credit cards, and repayment of those credit cards was often accomplished by taking out a second mortgage. Then, with credit cards free of debt, I would borrow more, and so the pattern repeated itself. Eventually, I carried over $100,000 worth of credit card debt. Ew. This monkey on my back brought my life to a screeching halt. In the summer of 1988, we were forced to close the store in the house and return to Ridgefield because there was very little business during the summer in Boca Grande. In Ridgefield, I would go back to house painting. As much as I resisted it, I did it because the jobs were there. We turned the basement of Jackie's parents' house into a place for us to live, and I made enough money that summer to keep us afloat as we headed into the fall. Deciding to expand my earning power, I got my real estate license. Jackie ran the bookstore during the seasonally slow days. My plan seemed faultless, but the two businesses needed more time to generate income to support us, and I was running out of time. Under the pressure of my knowing under the pressure of not knowing from one day to the next what might happen financially, the cracks in our marriage were showing. I often worked late. Arriving home, I'd be greeted with a nursery school environment, no order, kids, crayons, and toys everywhere, immediately setting me off. I'd harp on Jackie to get control over the situation. She would give me lip service just to get me off her back. Apparently, she was interested in the kids' welfare more than agreeing with me. Our friction had no effect on the kids. Our friction had an effect on the kids, causing them to think I was unhappy with them, though my discontent was with their mother. I thought that in the Christian home, she was supposed to follow my leadership as the head of the family. I wanted order. She wanted the kids to have freedom of expression. Neither of us would yield. One day I arrived home to find romper room being conducted in the kitchen. I hit the ceiling. I screamed at Jackie about the kitchen's appearance and how my desire for order was basically being mocked. As usual, she responded with sarcasm. That's not really good, is it, kids? Christianity gone down the tubes. I blew up, grabbing a chair and smashing it on the floor. I demanded that Jackie show respect for my authority, or the next chair was going to go through the bay window. Smart enough to keep quiet, she knew she was not equipped to deal with such fury. I would live with the guilt of that moment as she would remind me that she had grown up with that table and chair set. Later, Jackie told me that Timmy now was affected by my blow up that day and was losing his little temper just as I had. The blame for this new behavioral patterns was assigned to me, and in a strange way, I would accept the blame, even though I did not witness this newfound behavior. I was being worn down for not meeting Jackie's expectations of my fatherhood, adding just one more piece of straw to an already weakening and breaking back. Blame can be a terrible form of projected guilt if you're not sure of your parental skills. As the pressure to be there for the kids turned into a chore rather than a joy, I stayed at work longer than I needed. One parent spent every moment trying to meet their every need while the other couldn't function in that capacity. As a result, our children were very needy. Their expectation be entertained became the force that drove a wedge between us. I did not believe in giving in to a child's every imagined need. Since my mate's belief was different, the stage was set for the good guy versus the bad guy. The good guy gave them what they wanted, the bad guy did not. My authority eroded as I fell into the trap of performing as a father rather than being a father. Jackie's constant reminders that I was not spending any time with her and the kids became the mantra that I was subjected to over and over again. It did not matter that this was a distortion of the truth. It became the truth. She compared me to other fathers in both her family and in mine. And because I did not believe in myself, I thought I was fighting a losing battle. 16 minutes. Ooh, I'm going to keep going a little bit here. If you look at a woman with lust in your eyes, that man has already committed adultery with his heart. As the years passed, I once again longed for the sexual excitement I had known through my erotic nature since my conversion. I had limited myself to a restricted sexual lifestyle, but I was relaxed. As I relaxed my rigidity, I now wanted more stimulation. I watched some soft porn, looked at some Playboy magazines, and even masturbated to this stimuli. Uh-oh. The guilt did not seem to rage as before, but the desire for more continued to oppress me. I found pleasure in these private moments alone, living in the desires of these fantasies as my world began to unravel. I completed real estate school in the fall of 1988, passed the state examination, and began to look for a place to put my license. I was offered a position in a firm in Boca Grande, but with no one to train me, I moved to a small office in Englewood, Florida. It was winter before I made my first sale as I tried to balance my time between the store and selling real estate. The income was not enough to prevent the obvious. How would I get through one more off season without going under? It was time to sell the bookstore. While the reason was there, while the season was here, get as much as possible for it, then build up the real estate business. Through much tribulation, the bookstore sold. With it, my dream became history. In the summer of 1989, I found my way. In the summer of 1989, it found me back in Ridgefield, Connecticut, trying to sell. This is why we have to edit. The summer of 1989 found me back in Ridgefield, Connecticut, trying to sell Florida real estate to any interested investor. I made a video of the properties in the Englewood area. Along with a brochure, I presented these to some of the real estate firms in the area, hoping to start a network of referrals for anyone considering moving to sunny Florida. It was a great idea, but I expected people to respond more quickly. I learned that real estate did not sell as quickly as I needed. So the fear of losing everything occupied my thoughts. I could have painted houses that summer, but I did not give myself that option. I chose instead to ride this last venture, hoping for a miracle. Eventually, the fear of losing everything gave me anxiety attacks as I imagined the worst. I began to resent the owner of my office, watching her make sales but not help me develop a marketing strategy. Real estate was a competitive game for her, but with no risks. Her independent wealth came from her husband. I was gambling everything. and I thought someone in her position could help me. Just a little advertising and the phone would ring, but she was not willing to help. So I left her firm to seek my fortune in Sarasota, Florida. Another company had presented me greater opportunity in this large market. I hoped that this would be true, and so did my prayers. I had all the trappings, bells, and whistles to play the part of a real estate agent. I drove a Volvo with payments. I had a car phone with payments. I owned a home with 5 acres with first and second mortgages. I also had very little income. My house was on the market so that if I downsized, I could continue to fuel the debt by living in a less expensive home with a smaller mortgage. If I could just get that one big sale, I could pull out of this nosedive and head for safer ground. But this vision encountered a major hitch as my life began to plummet down a slippery slope of no return. One day, a group of us who had attended real estate school together met for lunch. I was excited because it was an opportunity to be in the business environment and with young people again. Just 4 of us showed up, 2 men, and 2 women. Hold on. One day, a group of us attended real estate school together, and we met for lunch. I was excited about it because it was the opportunity to be in a business environment with young people again. Just 4 of us showed up, 2 men and 2 women. 3 of us were married. One of the women was not. And as we drank, I watched my fellow male counterpart begin to make the moves on our single female friend. I was cautiously thrilled, but tried to convince myself that I should be disturbed. I had been down this road before. It did have elements of excitement, but I would never do that again and risk everything. Ironically, the married woman told a story about a friend who risked an affair and lost his whole family. I thought, what kind of fool would do that? I was intoxicated with the lure of excitement as I witnessed the 2 flirt with one another. My cautionary thoughts were being provoked, and this romantic fever would catch me by surprise as the potion surged from within. I was taking the bait with very little will to run away from it. When I got home that evening, I told Jackie what had happened. For some reason, I told her that I could stop an affair if I was in one. I had been able to use my will in my experiences with Lee and Wendy, and I could certainly do the same if I fell into an affair now. This was the disturbing discussion for her. This was a disturbing discussion for her, and so I dropped the subject. It intrigued me, though, and helped me escape the financial fears looming around the corner. A chain is only as strong as the weakest link, and there was a buried weakness in me that was about to surface. Over the years, in an intimate moment, Jackie would ask me if I would ever leave her. I could not understand why she would question me. It seemed as if her asking was eroding my own confidence. I felt it was my responsibility to prove to her that her fears were unfounded. I remember how it made me feel as if I could not be trusted. I told her about all the misdeeds before my conversion and that those evils had been conquered by my walking the straight and the narrow. Yet for some reason she did question me. Could she see something in me that caused her to fear? And was her dependence on me creating the fear? Bringing her assurance and alleviating her fear became an impossible task to fulfill. This was codependency, and I was finding out how deeply entrenched I was in this web. All right, I'm going to stop it right now, 24 minutes. whoever is watching this thing and whoever is going to participate in editing this book, this is just to taste it. I'm not going to do it this way because it's hard if people don't have time, and you don't have the written form in front of you. But I did find this copy. We're going to make more copies. I'm going to have this manuscript, and I'm going to have this book finished in a couple of months. All right, happy trails to you. Bye-bye.